1. There were no characters, talismans, mysteries, recurring NPCs, adventures, or areas to explore. No creatures, secrets, heroes, dungeons, or villains. No plots, helms, realms, or lore. There was nothing. Even combat was rare as a dragon in a bakery. I stayed for over a dozen sessions out of pure incredulity. After all, these were my friends and friends of friends, all highly educated and personable adults. How is that possible? How did you guys fill 3-hour sessions week after week? Well, let me tell you, it wasn't all looking up rules and dealing with the problem player. Here are 2 real examples of our 3-hour sessions. A war is raging without context caused our connection to the players. Our employer, a mercenary manager with the personality of a sloth, tips us off to a sleeping dragon at the bottom of a lake, which would make a powerful ally. We spend an eternity traveling there, and 2 more trying to get to the bottom of the inexplicably deep lake. We fiddle with spells and potions and all manner of solutions, each one coming up short. Finally, we reach the sleeping dragon. We can't shake him awake. We try over and over again, but we roll badly, so the dragon remains asleep. Why would the DM have let us roll for that? Our magic effects wear off, and we have to start back at square one. I needed a long rest in real life. Eventually, we wake the dragon to beseech it to help us. For the first time in hours, nay, sessions, the players are engaged. The dragon yawns. I have been alive for 10,000 years. I don't care about you or your war. I'm going back to sleep. Our wizard visits the library, our elf forages, and we end the session. Every session was like that. A giant demon has eaten every single person in a massive city, and now it lurks within the ruins. Quietly we arrive at the docks. Then our party spends 3 hours of my life I will never get back, milling about, investigating, debating methods of approach, brainstorming traps, meditating on the nature of time, and doing nothing. Next session I say, guys, holy crap, let's just attack the thing. Our monk permastuns the monster and it dies effortlessly. We spend the rest of the session talking to an NPC we would never see again who wasn't really impressed. I left the group. I talked with my closest friend in the group, who is super close to the DM. Essentially, the only other DM they have ever had was even worse, in the complete opposite direction. It was the problem player at the table who was not only telling them how their PCs think and feel, but also randomly killing them. You can imagine what he was like as a player. My friend and the DM feel that the current campaign is maybe, possibly, a touch slow, but still the epitome of D&D. I pleaded with them to DM, but they said no, because they are extremely concerned with perfect rule adherence, and I am less familiar with the rules. Also, I gotta give a huge shout out to the fact that the brother of one of my friends joined the table, a shrink who is hilarious, genius, warm, and truly a great man. He chose to play a mute-brooding assassin. 2. I've been part of a gaming group for about 6 or 7 years, where 4 of us are still part of the main group, while 3 or 4 others have come and gone, or come and stayed for this years-long campaign. 3 of the 4 core players have been friends for a long time, and the 4th is a player's partner. The problem player is a great person out of game. One-on-one they're sweet and often charming, but once they're around more than one person they have to be the funniest, the nerdiest, and the most pop-cultured. They'll crack jokes, taking the shotgun approach, trying to act hilarious at every turn out of character, and when nobody wants to engage because we're all in character, problem player gets butthurt and pouts, and then repeats what they've just said 2 or 3 or 4 times before getting all huffy and announcing, "Nobody got that? Really? When it comes their turn, problem player is never ready, takes forever to look up their character sheet, and because they haven't been listening to the GM, has to ask what's going on, every time. They talk out of character constantly, and don't stop even when someone says, "I'm trying to listen to the GM?" Problem player just turns to the next person to continue the chatter. For the longest time, we've been able to ignore it or let it go, because we're all too old for this crap, in our 30s. But then problem player starts lashing out at me out of character at the table. Nothing major, but annoying AF. They'd laugh when my character got hit with big damage, but would pout when their character got hit at all. Or they'd talk over me and accuse me of being antagonistic when I would ask them to explain something. Don't even get me started on how weird they are on the GM's Discord. It's like they feel comfortable enough being friends out of game to dump on me in-game. It got so bad I began to dread our games and eventually interacted with their characters as little as possible. Turns out most of the other players were in the same boat. The last straw was when the problem player screamed at me out of character for something that happened to their character, entirely unrelated to anything I'd done. Their character got hit during combat for like 10 points of damage, while mine had been knocked unconscious and had been healed 2 or 3 times. Problem player whinged about it, and the GM pointed out I'd taken 4 times the damage problem player had, kind of ribbing problem player for pouting about being hit. They then proceeded to yell at me for always being superior. The GM had talked to them about all of this, and it's come up in our conversations as well. So it's not like we haven't tried to make things work. Maybe problem player is insecure or immature or both, and a gaming setting brings out the worst in them. Even though they say they really like gaming, it doesn't seem like they do. Or at least they don't like that TTRPGs are not Assassin's Creed or Final Fantasy. But between that and the GM getting so fed up with them being disengaged, the 3 of us have considered starting another game without problem player. GM still wants to finish the original campaign. It's weird because I still consider problem player a friend, but will never be able to game with them again. 3. I run Cyberpunk Red. I've had an online campaign running now for about 10 months. It's a solid group. Sure, we have had the occasional hiccup, but nothing worthy to tell until now. The Cyberpunk Red rulebook doesn't have any real rules to dictate carry weight, or how many items someone can carry with them at a time. It just relies on a rule of common sense. I relied on that as well and just kind of hand-waved checking for inventory a lot of the time. I don't like to get bogged down in micromanaging my players. I just want to get into playing. But there were a few moments where my player characters brought or wore items that didn't make sense at all to where they were going, and narratively it felt like it didn't work. Stuff like wearing police-issued armor to casual outing at a gang's dive bar, or bringing in an assault rifle to a carnival performance. I also wanted to encourage my players to think strategically about their carried inventories, and not be able to pull a rabbit out of their hat at a moment's notice. I tried to put together an inventory management homebrew, but the player this post is about immediately started looking for ways to exploit the proposed rules, so he could still carry 30+ items. It was completely against the spirit of what I was trying to accomplish. I decided to scrap what I originally proposed and said that I was going to do some thinking about how to change it, but essentially the goal is for people to be bringing closer to 12 items instead of 30+. I said I needed to think about a simple, fair way to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish, and that I encouraged everyone's feedback so that way we could have something everyone was happy with. 2 of the players approved of having something in place, as they liked to plan strategy. Player 3 started to have a meltdown. He said it completely undermines and nerfs his character to have an inventory limit of any kind. He said he built his character around having a lot of items, and it ruins it for him. I said there needs to be some kind of limit, as no one should have infinite items carried with them. Player 2 asked Player 3 what he thought was a reasonable and fair amount of items to carry. I also asked Player 3 how many items he actually used in the last few sessions, because it was not anywhere near 30 items. Player 3 refused the notion of having an inventory limit, and argued both in group chat and started blowing up my DMs, saying he would leave the group if I imposed an inventory system of any kind. No matter what it was, he would not agree it. And that was non-negotiable. He then said that if I do this, I need to make his character stronger by making drugs more powerful and changing his gas jet weapon to use handgun instead of shoulder arm skill. I said that if he wants to make a more powerful drug or make upgrades to the gas jet, he needs to consult with our tech player to propose an invention. There's an entire role dedicated to making upgrades and modifying items. I'm not going to do that for anyone for free. I ended up saying that I was suspending any kind of inventory management homebrew for now, and I would only implement something if everyone agreed it was fair. Player 3 refused this also, since I still wanted to implement something at some point, and decided to quit the campaign. Quite frankly, the ultimatums, the tantrum, and the entitlement soured me to him as a player, and to be honest, as a person as well. He started asking about doing a send-off for his character in-game, which I haven't responded to as I'm frustrated and disgusted at his attitude. Update. I have a small update about the situation. I told the player that I will not be doing any send-offs for the character. I told him he chose to leave because he wanted to metagame, and was focused on winning instead of telling a story. I also said that I did not appreciate being given ultimatums and being told, run the game the way I want or I'm leaving. So that's it. It's done. He told me, quick correction, the main reason I'm actually leaving is because of the time zone differences and unhealthy hours. He said he wasn't trying to be a power gamer, but it was about what was more fun for him. This actually made me even more irritated, because I don't believe he can in good faith say that he would have quit the game yesterday if the topic of inventory management had never come up. When we were discussing the issue in DMs yesterday, he eventually got to the point where he said, I can't be bothered with this anymore, I'll leave the campaign. He then made a long post to the group chat that he was leaving, and he gave inventory management and his spiel about it as reason number 1 for why he was leaving. I hesitate to use the term, but it did feel like he was trying to gaslight me about what happened in that moment, in some attempt to placate me and make me feel like the circumstances around him leaving the game were more acceptable somehow. It certainly had the opposite effect. 4. It had all led up to this, 4 mortals against a god. The day before I had woken up in a cell with 3 strangers. A couple of halflings, a druid and rogue. They were checking each other's wounds to make sure they were all right, and a half-elf, paladin, with sunken eyes. No equipment, no spell-casting focus or spellbook for my human wizard, and no recollection on how we ended up there. When we eventually escaped our cell, we found out that our captors were wolvers, humanoids with wolf heads. Their behavior and social structure was similar to that of fantasy orcs. Their strength was in their number. They dined on other humanoids' flesh, and none of them was the sharpest tool in the shed. After finding our equipment and freeing other prisoners, we realized our situation hadn't improved. The prison was on an old island surrounded by a stormy sea. However, there were no available ships on our side of the island, and the other was brimming with hundreds and hundreds of wolvers. Many of the captives were kids and non-combatants, and we couldn't drive them to a reckless, pointless, and suicidal charge even if we wanted to. It became clear that we had been brought to the island to complete a ritual for the wolvers. Their god had been chained by 4 guardians against which the wolf humanoids were powerless. If we wanted to save ourselves and the other prisoners, we had to defeat the guardians that were capable to hold an evil and chaotic deity. We were level 5, but we weren't ready to surrender yet. Once we freed the wolf god, we vowed to destroy him once and for all or die trying. The battles against the guardians were surprisingly easy. The rogue enjoyed the help of my owl familiar to always apply sneak attack. Our paladin picked up a longsword that allowed him to deal 3d6 additional necrotic damage every time he hit with it, and the druid used his wildfire spirit and scorching ray to burn everything in his path, while also throwing the occasional healing word when things got dire. I had built my abjuration wizard to survive a couple of hits by starting with a level of artificer, while also debuffing our enemies with phantasmal force and web. However, all was not well. Our paladin was having visions of his deity, an eldritch abomination from outer space. He started to be able to use fleshy tentacles to strike his enemies in combat, but when he did, he entered a frenzied state where he regarded everyone as his foe. Me and the halflings debated attacking him to put him down, but his strength was needed in the final battle against the evil deity. Also, PvP is rarely fun in D&D, even when everyone's in on it from the start, and this was not the case. As the fourth guardian fell, a magic door opened before us. We looked at each other, an improbable group of adventurers, woefully underprepared to fight a god, but that had learned to trust each other's strengths and to cover for each other's weaknesses. Our resources were not depleted. We were able to finish a long rest right before the final confrontation. The rogue, the druid, the paladin, the wizard, and the DMPC, elven cleric, which rarely used her spells in combat and was essentially an underpowered fighter, crossed the threshold to the wolf god's den. That was the last time we ever had any semblance of agency. The god's form was that of a hulking behemoth of a wolver with 2 heads. The DM announced that the cleric was casting Bless out of initiative. After that, everyone was tasked to roll a wisdom saving throw. I was ready to fail it, as wisdom was my dump stat and I did not have proficiency in the saving throw. But I rolled a 19 on the die and a 3 on the d4, bringing the total to a more than respectable 21. Funnily enough, the rogue also rolled a 21, and the 2 PCs that had proficiency in wisdom saving throws both rolled a 13. The cleric didn't roll. The wolf god takes his enormous axe and effortlessly splits the druid in half from head to toe. We were stunned. Why was that the consequence of a failed wisdom saving throw? Why did only the druid die and the paladin was fine? Why weren't we in initiative yet? The druid player was not happy and started to pick up his things to leave. Me and the rogue declared our intent to fight. However, the paladin was suddenly behind us, with its tentacles at our throat. No rolls necessary. The DM asked the paladin what our fate was to be, and the paladin, after realizing we wanted to fight, choked the life out of us. Then the DM and the paladin started to discuss how the wolf god would become his next deity, and the terms of their contract. 10 minutes of one-on-one roleplay while the other 3 members of the party were unsure of what to do. Is this the end of the session? Are we going to have an afterlife scene? Are we going to be resurrected to do the wolf god's bidding? Was the DMPC cleric going to save us? Then the DM declared the session to be over. He was excited, satisfied, and utterly incapable of reading the room. The paladin was quiet and refused to meet our accusing eyes. How was the game, guys? The druid was the one to answer. Next time, just write a fucking book. 5. I am a newly started DM. Played D&D and ran it for years and thought I could make a little something off of the creativity I have for others online. It started through Fiverr. We were a month of my postings being up. Someone contacted me. This person wanted to run one of my homebrew campaigns and was bringing 4 people with them. 5 is the limit I have for online games. We did onboarding and ran everyone through character creation and the rules. Some people were new and some were playing for a long time. Everyone agreed with the rules, and we started the game the following week. The day before the first session, one player drops. They didn't message me, though they messaged their friend about it. No big deal. I'll have to rewrite some of the material as I made the world to work with their backstories. I quickly rewrite the session for the first day. They run through the first session and are loving the dynamic of the dungeon they start in. A prison they must escape, but monsters are keeping them there. A second session rolls around, and I'm down to 4 players. We start the session, and not 5 minutes in, one of the players says, "Hey, I've had a family emergency, I gotta go." Told him it's totally fine. Family comes first. We will see him next week. He leaves, which makes the encounter they were about to have a slog, but they managed. I nerfed the enemies for them to make it a bit easier. Third session. Earlier that week, one of the players asked about having someone from another campaign he played with in join. We vetted him and brought him on. The session starts, and the guy with family issues didn't join. He wouldn't message anyone, so we assumed he's still with family. He joins in an hour after we start because he forgot what time we started. Different time zones, so I understood. But not 5 minutes in, he left again, saying he's going to urgent care because he doesn't feel well. We wished him good health and to please keep us updated. We wanted to make sure he got there okay. That was the last any of us heard from him, and it would worry me, but I saw him launch up Tekken on Discord an hour later, so I think it was an excuse. At this point, I'd had to rewrite some of the world 3 times because of new players and players dropping. During that last session, they finally made it out of the prison and to their first town. The 5th session. Only the new guy and the one friend he invited showed up. The person who paid for it and the other couldn't make it. They said they had a family emergency. The other 2 were already there and figured I'd run a free side session for them. They explored the city and got into some shenanigans, and honestly, it was a lot of fun. Before the 6th session, in the middle of the week, I was messaged by the one paying for all this, apologizing because they didn't have a family emergency. Turns out they didn't want to play D&D anymore because the friend they invited to play, one of the 2 still remaining players, they found annoying. I was a bit shocked since this was someone they brought on themselves. They said they loved the campaign but couldn't stand that player or their character. I told them I understood, and I wished them luck and hope one day they reconsider playing D&D again. I messaged the other 2 and let them know that unfortunately their friend has some financial issues and family drama, so they won't be playing or paying anymore. So unfortunately, this is where the campaign ends. I was devastated thinking, man, my first paid sessions and it's fallen apart. Before anyone says it, yes, I considered running it for free for the other 2, but unfortunately I am the only one who has a job in my household, and doing this helps me to get just a smidge more income into my pocket. Even if it's only an extra $100 a month, that's still gas for my car. But as I was ready to hang it up, my players messaged. They really liked the campaign and wanted to pay to play. We came to an agreement, and we started the next session with just the 2 of them. I was super excited to continue. Those 2 players were also incredible at RP and really interacted with the world. I wasn't sure why the original purchaser found them annoying because I thought they just really got into character. But I can understand everyone has their own tolerance. That session went incredibly, and I told them I can't wait to continue the game with them. Fast forward to now. We are back up to 5 players and all of them are incredible. Sure, I had to change a lot about some areas of the world due to player backgrounds, but all of their backgrounds are so intriguing, and I want them to be really enveloped in the world. I just recently finished the main arcs for their characters, interconnecting all of them to realize they never met by accident. All of them mesh really well together too, so I'm excited to see where they take the story. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 20-Sided Dunce, Episode 8, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit that like button. And if you'd like early access to these and all the videos, then support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You can support me there for as little as $1, or more if you wish, a month. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring. If you enjoyed today's video a lot, why not leave a little tip? You can do that by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath the video. And you don't have to do that, but thank you if you choose to. Okay, as there's no other business today, I think we're clear on birthday shoutouts for a little while, although if you want one, send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. So let's move along to today's question and answer of the day. Keep it simple, what was the last movie you saw? Or rather, the last movie you finished watching. At one point, I'd started 3 different movies and hadn't finished any of them. One was The Marvels, which I did finish. I enjoyed it. I started it late at night and I was like, oh crap, I need to get to bed. The other was Glass Onion, which I then realized was a prequel. So I then had to go find Knives Out, watch that, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Then watch Glass Onion, which I also enjoyed. Looking forward to more with that character. So those were all good. But I think the last... I think Glass Onion was the last movie I watched. But I'm currently in the process, as in I've already started it, but then I had to go do some work. I was watching it on a break. The 2013 Evil Dead movie. Because I'd watched Evil Dead Rise recently, which I did quite enjoy. I don't know what's with me recently. I usually, much as I love watching movies, I've had trouble for a while now getting into the headspace to watch them. But I've been more motivated recently. I'm not sure what it is. But it's a good thing, and I'm enjoying most of the movies I've watched. I saw They Cloned Tyrone a while back, a couple of weeks back. Now, that was actually quite a fun movie. It has a point, it has a message, but still fun while communicating a good message. So, why don't you let me know in a comment below any good movies you've watched recently? And before I go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this answer was in relation to those who grow fruit and veg, what's something they're excited to try. And today's answer comes from Angharat Mac. I can grow tomatoes like no one's business. One year I got ambitious and grew sweet corn and sunflowers companion planted with squash and peas. The last 2 were supposed to help deter pests. Well, I had a lovely crop of corn that I didn't have time to pick during the sunset watering, but I knew would be at peak the next day. When I went out to get it, I found out that the raccoons had stripped all 3 or 4 dozen ears off the plants, eaten them, and left the cobs in a neat little pile in the middle of the patch. So I can grow stuff, but had to give up where I used to live, especially since something always cut off or ate all my squash and melon blossoms. Thank you very much for your answer. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And take very good care of yourselves.